Greetings, Dr. Joseph Martin here for you. Tolstoy and Gandhi. The kingdom of God is within you. Now, we all know that Tolstoy is thought to be one of the greatest authors of all time, but we're not going to talk about his book War and Peace or Anna Karenina or even his book Resurrection. We want to focus on his little known and needs to be very well known book, The Kingdom of God is Within You. Now, you know that Tolstoy was a very wealthy man, but he gave up everything in his life so that he could be the love that he is. And that means he gave up his interest and his involvement in the military as a soldier. He gave up the land that he owned in Yasnaya Polyana in Russia, and he gave up all his money, and he gave it away to the peasants. He gave his land away to the peasants, and he started a school, a survival school, you might say, to train them to grow their own food, build their own homes, build their own tools, and live communally and share their food and their services and their skill sets. Not unlike what we need to be doing today in order to survive what's coming on planet Earth in the coming decades, in the next 200 or 300 years. Now, Tolstoy was already an older man and in failing health when a very young Hindu man who was living in Johannesburg in South Africa in the early 1900s wrote him a letter because he had Mohandas K. Gandhi, or we call Mahatma Gandhi because he is a great soul. Gandhi had read something that Tolstoy had written called A Letter to a Hindu. In this letter, Tolstoy was quoting Vivekananda, and you'll note that I have 2 other videos on Vivekananda that you'll want to see. One about him as a man, person, a great soul, and another one on, I just did recently yesterday, on Vedanta, The Voice of Freedom, which is a book by Vivekananda. And in this letter to the Hindu, Tolstoy also talked about the Sermon on the Mount, and you'll realize that I've done all separately the Sermon on the Mount sets of values, and last Christmas you'll want to check out the 8 videos I did on the Sermon on the Mount by Jesus, the first Christ. And in this letter to the Hindu, Tolstoy also talked about his developing ideas of non-violence, ahimsa, if you like it, as Gandhi has taken it on, to use strikes and protests and non-violent movements socially, actively, and he said it would be the only solution to violence in the world and the only solution to violent revolution. Now, mind you, Tolstoy was writing this before the First World War in 1914. He wrote this in 1909. And Tolstoy wrote this before the Russian Revolution, which killed Tsar Alexander II and all his family. And ever since then, there have been so many revolutions in Russia, in China, in, of course, the First World War. And he said it was the only solution to violence and people going over to the evil side or the dark side, to hatred, evil, and killing. Now, Gandhi, living in Johannesburg in South Africa, was aware that the greatest social issue of his time was the maltreatment, the severe maltreatment of the Indian people living in the Transvaal in South Africa. And Gandhi, as a lawyer, was giving up his law practice and devoting himself to the freedom struggle of the Indian people. Let me read you 2 quotes. This is my favorite quote, and I'm going to give you quite a few by Tolstoy in this little video. Everyone thinks of changing the world, but no one thinks of changing himself. And I think that's the key to why things have gone so slowly in human evolution on planet Earth. Because the only key, as I've mentioned in all my videos, It's a psycho-spiritual inner work of the personal freedom of the soul and the ego serving the soul. And here's a quote from Gandhi, based on what he knew and learned from Tolstoy. Be the change you wish to see in the world. And I know many of you use this all the time in your daily life. Now, one can say clearly, and when you can read all the Tolstoy Gandhi letters, more and more of them are now online. You can read them all as I have. But before I get to that, let me just share a bit about my personal life and story, because life and inspiration is always about stories. And I hope you share all your stories with as many people as you can to inspire the great change of being the love you are. When I was a very young man, I was very sick, of course, as most of you know by now. Hole in my heart operation, first one in North America, 1958. All I did, besides playing the piano, which I love to do, was read books. And so I read everything by Tolstoy. But the last and the greatest book that I read by the age of 18 was The Kingdom of God is Within You, in which he says that the Christians are really not Christians because they don't understand the basic value of the life that Jesus led, which is he was just a man of pure love and he served everyone around him. And that those two principles, if you like, are the two laws of the New Testament, and I guess it would be great if all of us on the planet could abide by these and live them all the time, every day. And also at that time, I was reading about Gandhi because it was after the independence of India from colonization by the British in 1948, and I'm born in 1950. My life has actually been so inspired by Tolstoy and by Gandhi that I think about them constantly, and I've tried my very best on a daily basis to live the principles by which they taught, which is nonviolence, speaking up for the truth, looking at social injustice, which is the huge issue we all need to focus on now, and to give kindness and gentleness and respect to the poor, the downtrodden, the ethnic minorities, the First Nations of the world, the women of the world, the children of the world. There's so much violence, and the only way for us to really do this is to be the change in our own lives and be full of love, which Tolstoy said is the one characteristic we all need to be experiencing and living, and just share that with as many people as possible. You can see that in the letters of Tolstoy and Gandhi, Gandhi actually wrote to Tolstoy first, and he said, "Wow, I read your letter to a Hindu. This is amazing. Can you have it translated from Russian and from English into an Indian language so that we can all read it as well?" And Tolstoy said, "Yes, dear brother and friend, we will do this, and please leave in all the parts about Vivekananda and Krishna, whom I love, and Jesus, and so on, and let's translate it into some Hindu or Indian languages." In all the letters, Gandhi always refers to Tolstoy in signing off. He says, "Your obedient servant," and so you get a feeling value of the nature of their relationship. And Gandhi is always very careful not to tax the waning health of Tolstoy with too long letters and too much correspondence. But it did become one of the great kind of friendships of all time in all cultures of this world. It has changed the world because, as you know, not only did it influence Gandhi in his philosophy, his connection to Christ and to Krishna, and to love as the greatest principle, to nonviolence, to ahimsa, and to, of course, all the strikes and the protests in India against British colonization and taxation, the salt tax and so on, to eventually, over a period from 1910 to 1948, give the freedom to the Indian people in their independence in 1948. So you can see that in world history there is a practical solution in nonviolence, in standing up and speaking for the truth, and fighting social injustice and political colonization and injustice, and standing up for spiritual sovereignty through love. Well, this is a great relationship that will abide through all the centuries to come. And I wanted to share this with you because I think it's important for us to feel for Tolstoy and Gandhi and ask ourselves, who is it we can bond with? Someone in another culture, someone in another place, where we can bond and support them in their freedom struggle, in their rights for sovereignty. Maybe it's with a group of women. Maybe it's with the First Nations peoples where you live. Wherever it may be, I encourage and inspire you to be determined and dedicated to finding a way to serve humanity. Now, in closing, I'd like to share with you a few really significant quotes from Leo Tolstoy. And these are ones that I think will give you what you need to take action, have heart, be the love you are, and be really inspired to be freedom fighters and freedom speakers on behalf of all who suffer. Here are the quotes from Tolstoy. I understand only because I love. The sole meaning of life is to serve humanity. There is no greatness without simplicity, soulfulness, kindness, and truth. And finally, the two most powerful warriors are patience and time. And of course, Nelson Mandela knew that very well. 27 years in Robben Island prison gave him all the time and the patience to develop himself and really move forward now. And I would say this to you, to those of you who are spiritual light workers or soulful people who are trying to be kind and do good to everyone around you, have patience. Timing is always perfect. Develop yourself. Do all your inner psycho-spiritual inner work. Find the inner strength of character that Tolstoy and Gandhi had. And as you do, time will show that the development of the strength and the character inside you will give you love and peace and power and righteousness and a sense of justice and truth to liberate everyone around you. And I would say that the life of Tolstoy and Gandhi is the life of this. Love and liberation through the literacy of yourself and the literacy of all the peoples of the world. For all the children of the world need to be able to read and write and have education as a way to their freedom as well. So love, literacy, and liberation. And finally, the very last quote from Tolstoy, which I did want to add to you, is like, if you want to be happy, be. Dr. Joseph Martin, Om Namah Shivaya, Namaste. I see the God Goddess inside you. Be the love you are.